Notre Dame just landed a massive piece to its defensive puzzle with a commitment of four-star defensive tackle Tiki Hola. Meanwhile, USC just lost a key recruit after Notre Dame came calling, and this class of 2026 is shaping up to be the best recruiting class Marcus Freeman has assembled yet. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak, bringing you the latest news and analysis on the Fighting Irish. And I'm thrilled to have you here with me on Monday, May 12th. And thanks for starting your work week right here by making this your first listen of the day. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube so that way you never miss an episode. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, we got lots of recruiting talk in store for today's show because it was another day and another commitment for Marcus Freeman and the Irish. This time, it was four-star defensive tackle Tiki Hola who announced his pledge to the Irish on Saturday over SMU and USC, and this is a big-time get at a position of need. Then we're going to shift our focus to former USC commit Kohen Brown, who just decommitted from the Trojans after receiving an offer from Notre Dame. Are the Irish now the favorite to land him? Potentially. Either way, the offseason war between Notre Dame and USC rages on, and it has been really entertaining to follow over the course of these past few months. Finally, we're going to wrap things up with a look ahead at what's next for Notre Dame in the class of 2026 because there could be another big-time commit this week. But let's begin with Tiki Hola. And going into this cycle, I said that quarterback and defensive tackle were the biggest needs for Notre Dame in this class by far. And they've had Noah Grubbs committed for a really long time, nearly a full calendar year as their one and only quarterback commit in this class. And I don't think Grubbs is wavering on that commitment at all. So they pretty much checked that box. So all the focus is on the defensive tackle and really the defensive line as a whole. And adding Hola doesn't completely fulfill that need, but it's certainly a big step in the right direction. So Hola is now the third defensive lineman in this class. The five-star Rodney Dunham leads the way, and then Ebenezer Iwatade is the other defensive lineman, but those two guys are going to play defensive end in college. Hola is the only interior defender to commit at this point. He's also Notre Dame's eighth commitment since the start of April, so they have just been on an absolute tear over the course of this past month, plus a little bit more than that, and it's going to continue to roll on here. But Hola is ranked just outside the top 300 nationally. He's the number 35 ranked defensive lineman on the 24/7 team composite. He's listed at 6'2", 285 pounds, and he has a relentless motor for someone who is as big as he is, and he produced at an extremely high level during his junior season, 102 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and something that Marty Biagi's really going to like. He had 3 blocked kicks last year, and we know that Notre Dame prioritizes special teams, specifically being very aggressive on field goal block and punt block. So he's a very versatile player. I think he is going to play nose tackle when he's at Notre Dame. He could play either one. He could play defensive tackle or nose tackle, but either way, it's just very important that Notre Dame got an interior defender because they missed on Simote Koatanga. He was their number one guy at the position. He ended up at USC. We're actually going to talk a little bit about him later on in the show. They're still very much after Elijah Golden, but getting a player like Tiki Hola to commit to this class was very important. So here's how Notre Dame was able to land him. Hola's visited Notre Dame multiple times. He was here for the Blue Gold game and Junior Day, but down the stretch there, SMU made a serious run. It was Notre Dame. They were considered the lean for a long time, but SMU was right there in the mix. They're close because Hola's from Texas. He's also the second Texas prospect to commit to Notre Dame in this class right after Javion Osborne committed on May 3rd. But I remember thinking like Hola was an automatic get for Notre Dame. And then when we had Eric Thomas on the show last week, he was like, keep an eye out for SMU. They just had Hola on campus for a visit, and then they did an in-home visit. But then defensive line coach Al Washington, assistant Nick Sebastian, and also Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa, who's a new addition to the recruiting staff this offseason. Obviously, he's not new to Notre Dame. He's a former player, but still, they were all very key in securing Hola's commitment. Washington and Sebastian actually made an in-home visit to Hola just a couple days before he made his announcement, and I think that was the key factor there in closing the deal, because SMU was giving them a big run, and they don't call it Southern Millionaires University for nothing, folks. They have a lot of NIL money. Notre Dame has actually lost out to SMU for a couple of recruiting battles in the past, so the fact that they were able to land this one is huge, because he's a very good player at a position of need, and they did not have a defensive tackle yet in this class. So it's very important that they were able to land him. They got it done on Saturday. His commitment video was pretty cool as well. And the fact of the matter is, Notre Dame has just not recruited defensive tackle well in recent years. So that's why they had to go out and get Jared Dawson in the portal from Louisville. That's why they had to go out and get Elijah Hughes in the transfer portal. And Hughes is a reserve player. He hasn't even started a single game in his collegiate career, but Notre Dame needed depth because of misses on the recruiting trail. You look at what they got last year. They only added one player, Sean Sevillano Jr., in the class of 2024. And honestly, it's too early to tell on him. I think he could end up being a good player, but he was only he's ranked number 63 among defensive linemen in his class. And he could end up being a really good player in college, exceeding all the rankings. But the fact that he was the only defensive tackle that they got in the class last year when it was a position of need going in was not really encouraging. You go back to the class of 2023, Brennan Vernon. Unfortunately, he ended up being a miss despite the fact that he was a 4-star recruit and actually a borderline 5-star when he committed to Notre Dame. They also added Devin Houston in that class. Houston is now on the offensive line, so that's a miss as well. 2022, they had Donovan Heinisch, who, of course, he's going to commit to Notre Dame, right? Because of his brother, Kurt, was a legend at Notre Dame. And I feel like if they didn't get Donovan Heinisch, that would be insane. And he was the only defensive tackle they got in that class. In 2021, it was only Jason Onye. So Hola is the highest ranked defensive tackle to commit to Notre Dame since Brendan Vernon. Obviously, there's no guarantee that Hola is going to live up to his potential, but it's a step in the right direction because you need to keep taking swings at guys at this position. They've also missed out on some other 5-stars, like remember when they went all in on Justin Scott, who is from Chicago. He ultimately committed to Ohio State. Then he ended up at Miami. He's actually going to face Notre Dame in the season opener this year. So Notre Dame is definitely not done pursuing defensive tackles in this class. They're also pursuing Alistair Vallejo, who is a pretty under-the-radar prospect who's just flying up all the boards and all the recruiting rankings out there. Notre Dame is after him pretty hard, and really, it came out of nowhere. He just got a couple offers, and now there's some really big-time programs going after him. Notre Dame feels like they're in a good position to land him, but we'll see how that goes. And then they're also after 4-star Elijah Golden. They've been after him for a really long time. If Koatanga wasn't their number 1 defensive tackle prospect in this class, Elijah Golden was certainly right there behind him at number 2. So they already have a really strong defensive line class with Dunham and Iwatade on the edges. Now they have Hola in the interior, and if they're able to get Hola, Vallejo, and Golden, that would be terrific. 5 defensive linemen, all really good caliber players, and they're 60% of the way there. Will they ultimately get all 5? That remains to be seen, but I think they're certainly making some progress to getting that done. I think Golden is going to be the hardest one to get out of any of these teams. Alabama is after him really hard now, too. So Notre Dame is going to be a fight for Golden until the very end. And even in the case of Hola, this stuff is never really over in the modern day and age of recruiting. SMU is close to home for Tiki Hola, but I think that with what Al Washington has been doing on the recruiting trail in this class, he is just not going to get outworked. And also got to give credit to Sebastian and MTA as well, because they're certainly helping him out. But I feel like getting a guy like Hola, it's not going to change, the narrative about Notre Dame and defensive line. It's not like getting a 5-star prospect, but he's a really solid 4-star prospect. And that is what Notre Dame needed, because they just have missed at this position so many times in this class. Now, he cannot be the only defensive tackle. If he ends up being the only interior defensive lineman, I would consider that a disappointment, just given the fact that Notre Dame already has 3 good players on the D-line, and they're after some other guys, and they're really in really strong position, specifically with Vallejo. So I think they need to get at least one more, but getting Hola is huge. He is exactly the type of interior defensive lineman Notre Dame needs to build a dominant defensive front and maintain that in the future. And I think his commitment showcases that Notre Dame is not afraid to go after it with some NIL programs. And you might not consider SMU to be a top NIL program, but trust me, there's a lot of money down there. USC was after him hard. They have a lot more NIL money to throw around, and Notre Dame was still able to get this done. But Tiki Hola isn't the only player Notre Dame have poached from a rival. Up next, we're going to talk about Kohen Brown's decommitment from USC after receiving an offer from the Irish. Is he about to join Marcus Freeman's class of 2026? And is this going to be another layer in the Cold War that's been going on between Notre Dame and USC this offseason? That's next. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. With the addition of Tiki Hola, Notre Dame now has 2 prospects from Texas in their class of 2026, and they're looking to add another one. And this one is particularly interesting because he's a wide receiver who was just committed to USC, but decommitted 2 days after receiving an offer from Notre Dame. And now Notre Dame is certainly trending for his services. The prospect I'm talking about is wide receiver Kohen Brown. The Irish are making a major play for the receiver out of Texas, and this could be yet another layer in the back and forth battle that has been going on between USC and Notre Dame all offseason long. And when you look at Kohen Brown's recruiting profile, it's not going to jump off the page, right? He's not ranked particularly high. He's ranked number 618 nationally, the 97th ranked wide receiver in this class, but he's a good player. He's 6'1", allegedly. I think he's more like 5'11", 190 pounds. He was very productive for his high school last season, 54 receptions for 1,084 yards and 11 touchdowns, but his speed is why Notre Dame is after him. He clocked a 10.69 in the 100-meter and a 22.39 in the 200-meter, so that's a legitimate track speed. So sure, he obviously has some things to develop as a wide receiver once he gets to the college level, but Notre Dame wants some speed on the outside, and Kohen Brown certainly has that. But that's not really why we're talking about Kohen Brown today. We're talking about Kohen Brown because this Cold War that I refer to it as, which I guess it's not really a Cold War because eventually these two teams are going to square off on the football field this year, but the drama that's been going on between these two schools throughout the offseason has been really entertaining and has just created a new fun chapter in this rivalry. And it all obviously started once Chad Bowden left Notre Dame to become the general manager at USC. Ever since that happened, there have been a lot of shots from the Southern California side to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has not responded on social media or anything like that. But this could be another fun battle to watch because USC did not want to lose him, even though he's not ranked super high, and they have a million commits in their class already. Like USC does have the number 1 ranked class on the 24/7 Sports team composite. They also have 27 commits, so that number is a little bit skewed. But if you go through the recruitment timeline for Kohen Brown, it's pretty funny. So he commits to USC on April 2nd of this year, locked in with the Trojans. But then Javian Osborne committed to Notre Dame publicly on May 3rd. Javian Osborne and Kohen Brown are good friends. Such good friends that Kohen Brown was with Javian Osborne at his announcement, at his party that he had on the day that he made his commitment to Notre Dame public. And then Kohen Brown posted something on X, basically congratulating Javian on his commitment. And then Javian immediately started recruiting him publicly to Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame officially offered Brown a scholarship on May 7th, and Kohen Brown decommitted from USC on May 9th. So this is just really fun to watch from afar because it's just another battle. And like the fact that Marcus Freeman basically taught Chad Bowden how to recruit. Now, that's not to say that like Chad Bowden wouldn't be successful without Marcus Freeman, because I do think he's talented, even though he rubs me the wrong way. But to think that those two guys were working side by side for years, going back to their days at Cincinnati. And then when Marcus Freeman came over from Cincinnati to become the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, his first move was to bring Chad with him. And then once Marcus Freeman was promoted to be the head coach, Chad Bone was recruited or promoted to be the recruiting coordinator at Notre Dame. And then ultimately, he was promoted to become the general manager after Michigan tried to poach him before the 2024 season. And now they're rivals. And even though we already knew that when Chad Bone left Notre Dame to go to USC, we're seeing it happen, right? We're seeing them compete for prospects on the recruiting trail. And given how much those guys and how much they care about recruiting and the effort that they put in, it's really fun to see these battles play out. And USC has certainly won a couple of those battles, even though Notre Dame just got Tiki Hola, even though USC wanted him. I already mentioned the defensive tackle, Simote Koatanga, one of Notre Dame's top priorities at defensive tackle. He committed to USC. They also got 4-star wide receiver Trent Mosley, a double Notre Dame legacy, who is now part of the Trojans 2026 recruiting class. That is what sparked the weird recruiting video when USC was basically saying, like, create your own legacy. They announced the commitment with this video, and it was basically just plays from like before high definition of USC wide receivers, like Mike Williams making plays on Notre Dame, and every single highlight was against Notre Dame, which was clearly on purpose because Mosley's parents went to Notre Dame, and they were saying that, like, if you go to USC, it's wide receiver U, all that is fun, even though you look at the scoreboard over the past 15 years, Notre Dame has certainly dominated in that regard. They also got Kennedy Urlacher from Notre Dame, but Notre Dame did also get one of their players, defensive tackle Elijah Hughes, but that was actually before Chad Bone. So in a way, Chad Bone probably targeted him, helped get him from USC to Notre Dame before he ultimately left to take the job with the Trojans. So Kohen Brown isn't going to be the biggest commitment in this class if he ultimately ends up at Notre Dame, but he could be another chess move in a growing recruiting rivalry that's become a focal point in this cycle, really ever since Chad Bone left, because even though Notre Dame would compete with USC for recruits in the past, it certainly means a lot more now, knowing that Chad is over at USC and Chad helped Notre Dame build this roster. He's part of the reason why Notre Dame made it to the national championship, because of his efforts building Notre Dame's roster, and he deserves credit for that. But now he's the enemy. Not only that, he's the rival, and he's actively trying to get players currently on Notre Dame's roster to go in the transfer portal. Didn't really happen with the exception of Kennedy Urlacher. But this could be another win for Notre Dame. Would it be as big as getting Trent Mosley? Probably not. But hey, you got to take the wins where you can get them. And I just think that this move would signify Freeman's ability to win over talent from USC. And the fact that Javian Osborne immediately made that move to start recruiting his friend, I just think it's fun to watch all of this how all this plays out. And if Brown were to commit to Notre Dame, I think he'd be a good slot receiver. He's got vertical threat capabilities because he's so fast. He tracks the wall pretty well for someone who is more of a track guy, but like he's not just a track guy. Like, he can go out there, make some plays for a deep ball, even though he's not the biggest wide receiver. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Chris Tyree when he was a wide receiver. I think he could be better than that, but you think about Chris Tyree's speed and how he's developed a lot more as a wide receiver at Notre Dame once he made that position switch. Like, I could see that for Kohen Brown. And USC is still in the mix. I'm sure they're going to recruit him hard. I believe he still has an official visit scheduled with them in June. I'm not sure if he's actually going to take that. And there's also some other schools nearby in Texas, like Baylor is going to recruit him pretty hard as well. And I'm sure some other schools in Texas will probably get in the mix. But this could be another chapter in the offseason rivalry with Notre Dame and USC. And I think the timing of Notre Dame's aggressive push just weeks before Brown's official visits, and now the fact that he decommitted 2 days after the fact, I think he's ultimately going to end up in Notre Dame's class. It would be a nice little win, nice little feather in the cap for the Irish. And it's just another layer. It's like another chapter. And I'm sure there's going to be more. And there's going to be more drama. And there's going to be more intrigue between Notre Dame and between USC. And it's going to be all leading up to that game. And look, like, we don't know how many more Notre Dame USC games are left, at least not on an annual basis, because USC is doing everything they can to get rid of that game, which is extremely unfortunate because I love that rivalry. So if maybe this is the future of the rivalry, right? Like recruiting battles and things like that. But for this one, looks like Notre Dame is in good position. All right, with Tiki Hola now committed and Kohen Brown potentially on the verge of flipping, Notre Dame is maintaining their momentum on the recruiting trail, but it's not stopping there. Up next, we're going to break down what's next for Notre Dame in the class of 2026, who's on their radar, and which recruits could be next to pull the trigger. So Notre Dame just made one big move by adding Tiki Hola, and they could have another big move coming up later this week. Running back Jonas Walton is making his commitment announcement on Wednesday, and I believe Notre Dame is in very good position to land him, which would make him the second running back in this class to go along with Javian Osborne, who Notre Dame just got over a week ago on May 3rd. And as we talked about with Eric Thomas last week, Notre Dame is a little bit more open to taking 3 running backs in this class. I'm not sure how that's going to work because they already have more talent in that room than they know what to do with Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Keedron Young, Aeneas Williams, and Jabron Payne, and Nolan James Jr. And then you add 3 more guys in the mix, even though I expect 2 of them, Love and Price, to be gone after this season. There's just a lot of guys in that room and only one ball to go around. But I'm not going to complain that Notre Dame is making such strong moves with so many talented prospects because I think Jonas Walton is really good. I think Seven Walker is really good. And I really, really like Brian Bonner, the other running back prospect. But if they get Osborne, Walton, and Walker, I don't see Bonner joining the class 2 to make it 4. But Notre Dame now has 15 commitments total in their class of 2026, and they have 8 since the start of April. And I think it's going to be 9 after Walton. But then after that, who are the other top targets on Notre Dame's board? Well, they've been after Joey O'Brien, the defensive back out of Pennsylvania, for a really long time. Top 100 player. Just loaded with talent, 6'3", great size, everything you want for in a safety. He could play cornerback. I think Notre Dame projects him more as a safety, but he's one of those players where it's like, he's so good, just get him on campus and you figure out the position later. But it's a 2-team race right now between Notre Dame and Penn State. Penn State has done a phenomenal job at keeping all of the top players in Pennsylvania home. If you look at the top 10 players in the state, I think 7 are already committed to Penn State. Joey O'Brien would be the second highest one, and if he'd be the only one that didn't go to Penn State if he ends up with Notre Dame. But I believe Mike Mickens has established a really strong relationship with him, and it's going to come down to the wire, but Notre Dame is certainly after him very hard. They're also after another defensive back, safety Nick Reddish. I think he is the safer choice to land with Notre Dame. He's not rated quite as high as Joey O'Brien, but he would be a big-time add in this class. And then defensive tackle, Elijah Golden. We've already talked about him a lot in the show. I think this is another one that's going to come down to the wire. He's in Florida. Florida's after him. Alabama's after him. And when you're in SEC country and you've got all the SEC schools who want your services, Notre Dame comes in like that's not a battle that they had won in the past, especially with defensive tackle recruits. But Al Washington, Nick Sebastian, they continue to push and try to get Elijah Golden to be part of this class, and that would be a huge get at a big-time position of need. We talked about Alistair Vallejo as well. That Notre Dame could be making a move there, but I think with Vallejo, he's getting so much new interest. Like, he was an under-the-radar prospect a couple months ago, and now he's just being flooded with all these offers because he was a really productive player in high school. I'm a little bit surprised at the timing of it. Like, just one school likes him, and they're like, wait, who's offering him? And now every other school falls in line. That's something we're probably going to talk about in a later episode of just how his profile just sort of jumped out of nowhere. But he's another guy that Notre Dame is after and could potentially commit in the near future. And then at tight end, Evan Jacobson and Ian Premier. Notre Dame is after both those guys. They really need to add 2 tight ends in this class. They've only been adding 1 per year, but they're looking to add 2 this cycle. I think they're in good position with both of those guys. Getting Premier out of the state of Kansas is going to be difficult. Kansas and Kansas State are both after him hard, but Notre Dame has a good chance there, and they also have a good chance with Evan Jacobson. So they have 15 commitments right now. I think it's going to be 16 by the end of this week with Jonas Walton on board, and then Joey O'Brien, that could be 17. Reddish would be 18. Golden, Vallejo, 19, 20. Jacobson, Premier, 21, 22. And now you're talking about rounding out the class. Obviously, I'm not saying that all these guys are going to commit to Notre Dame, but you can kind of see where it's heading because we're in the middle of May right now. The early signing period isn't until December, but Notre Dame is making significant headway right now, and then the big month is going to be June when they have a bunch of these guys on campus for their official visit weekends. Notre Dame likes to stack them so that they get a bunch of prospects on campus at the same time, surrounded by the commits, to really just kind of boost that culture, boost that relationship with guys who are committed in the class, and really entice those guys to want to be part of that, want to be part of that community. So I think May is really all gearing up for that. And then June, they're going to try to close during those official visits. And then as the month of July pans out, it's a dead period in the calendar in terms of like visits and things like that. But that's when guys commit. And that is when Notre Dame can really start to just close out this class strong. And I think they're headed that way. So areas left to focus on, I think defensive line. They still need those two bodies, Vallejo and Golden. If those two guys don't commit to Notre Dame, they're going to have to look elsewhere. They have added some late offers in this class, but I think that is still the top priority, as is wide receiver. They have two right now with Dylan Faison and Bubba Frazier. They need to have probably 4 to 5. It could be 3 if Kohen Brown ends up committing to Notre Dame. But even if Brown commits, if he doesn't commit, the real two big-time targets for Notre Dame, Caden Finley, Braden Robinson, they've been after those guys for a really long time. Looks like Braden Robinson is no longer considering Ohio State because he canceled his official visit there. But Caden Finley has been their top guy at the wide receiver position for a very long time. So they need to land those two guys plus Brown. Adding a 5-man receiver haul would be very good because they have not recruited the receiver position very well in the past. They need to round out some other positions like linebacker, getting a guy like Tang King. But the fact that they are in this position, and you compare that to the conversations about recruiting literally at like the end of March, and you can see how far this class has come and the work that this staff has done is just truly remarkable. And I just give a ton of credit to Marcus Freeman, Mike Martin, the new general manager, Carter Ellman, who is the leader of Notre Dame recruiting. He's the one guy who stayed on after Chad Bowden left. And Ellman also had offers, I believe, from Wisconsin. They offered him the general manager position. He's a Notre Dame alum, wants to be at Notre Dame. And those three guys and everyone who's involved with the staff, they are capitalizing on the momentum. And I think the next few months could bring in several 4-star commits, more blue chip prospects, and this could end up being the best class of the Marcus Freeman era. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. I'm going to be back tomorrow morning to take a deep dive into the offensive depth chart now that spring practice is over. There was honestly more movement than I expected coming out of spring practice. We're going to break down why that is tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for that for my post-spring depth chart on the offense. Remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And if you enjoyed the show today, give this video a like, rate the podcast 5 stars, leave a review, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.